What happens when an owner decides to test his own company by hiring himself under a fake identity? It's a story of trust, betrayal, and the power of truth. Today, we'll meet a man named Orson Gray, who thought he knew everything about his business, but ended up learning more than he ever imagined. Orson Gray was no ordinary businessman. He had built his construction company from scratch over 20 years, starting with just a small team and growing it into one of the largest firms in the city. His name was respected everywhere, but lately something felt off. The complaints were piling up, workers unhappy, deadlines missed, clients dissatisfied. Orson couldn't figure out why. He spent hours reviewing reports, talking to managers, even visiting sites personally, but nothing seemed to change. One evening, as Orson sat alone in his office late at night, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop, an idea struck him. What if he went undercover? What if he joined his own company as a new hire, saw things through fresh eyes, and found out what was really going on? It wasn't easy to pull off. He'd need a disguise, a fake resume, and most importantly, courage. But Orson decided to take the risk. If anyone could fix this mess, it would be him. The next morning, Orson woke up early, ready for his transformation. He shaved his neatly trimmed beard, dyed his hair darker, and put on a pair of glasses that made him look completely different. With a deep breath, he submitted a job application online under the name Henry Cole. He listed skills he actually had, years of experience in construction, but left out anything that might connect him to his real identity. To everyone else, Henry Cole was just another hopeful applicant looking for work. 2 weeks later, Orson received an email inviting him for an interview. As he walked into the same building where he owned the entire 5th floor, his heart raced. This was it. He stepped into the HR department, greeted politely by a young man named Calvin. "Hi, Mr. Cole," Calvin said warmly. "Nice to meet you." Orson smiled nervously. "Likewise, Calvin." Calvin asked questions about Orson's past jobs, how he handled tough situations, and what motivated him. Each question hit close to home because Orson knew exactly what worked, and didn't, in his company. By the end of the interview, Orson felt confident. "You're hired," Calvin announced after flipping through some papers. "Welcome aboard." Orson nodded, trying not to let his excitement show. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he believed. On his first day, Orson, or rather Henry, was assigned to a crew working on a residential project. The team consisted of 4 men: Leo, a gruff but fair foreman; Marcus, a quiet worker who always kept to himself; Jake, a loud jokester who tried too hard; and Randy, a younger guy eager to learn. At first, they treated Henry like any other newcomer, polite but distant. But as days turned into weeks, Orson began noticing things he hadn't seen before. The workers complained about long hours without overtime pay, broken tools that weren't replaced, and unfair treatment by certain supervisors. They spoke freely around Henry because they didn't know who he really was. One afternoon, while taking a break, Leo leaned against a wall and sighed. "I don't get it," Leo muttered. "Why does the boss care so little about us? We're the ones doing all the hard work." Orson froze. Hearing those words stung worse than he expected. He wanted to defend himself, explain that he cared deeply about his employees, but instead he stayed silent. That night, lying awake in bed, Orson realized the truth. Somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with the people who mattered most, the ones keeping his dream alive. Orson, now known as Henry Cole to his co-workers, quickly realized that making a difference wasn't going to happen overnight. The team was skeptical of new hires, especially ones who seemed eager to please or overly ambitious. But Orson didn't let that deter him. He knew he had to earn their trust, not just for the sake of his undercover mission, but because he genuinely cared about improving the company. During team meetings, Orson began voicing concerns and suggesting practical solutions to problems others had grown accustomed to ignoring. When workers complained about broken tools slowing down progress, he advocated for better equipment and even proposed cost-effective alternatives that wouldn't break the budget. His suggestions weren't grand gestures. They were small, thoughtful changes that showed he understood the challenges faced on the ground. At first, the team treated his ideas with mild interest at best. But over time, they noticed a difference. Projects moved faster, morale improved slightly, and people started looking at Henry differently. Even Leo, the gruff foreman who rarely gave anyone the benefit of the doubt, began to soften. One day, while troubleshooting a particularly tricky structural issue, Leo turned to Orson for advice. You've got good eyes, Leo admitted grudgingly, nodding toward a blueprint Orson had marked up with detailed notes. What do you think we should do here? It was a small moment, but it meant everything to Orson. It was proof that his efforts were paying off, that he was becoming part of the team rather than just another face in the crowd. About a month into his undercover stint, Orson stumbled upon something that would change everything. While helping organize files in the office one evening, he came across a folder labeled Confidential. Curiosity got the better of him, and he opened it cautiously. Inside, he found documents detailing illegal activities within the company, funds being siphoned off by someone high up in management. The money was meant for employee salaries and project materials, yet it was disappearing into private accounts without explanation. Orson's hands trembled as he read through the evidence. Names and dates jumped out at him, confirming his worst fears. Someone close to him, someone trusted, was betraying the very foundation of the business he'd worked so hard to build. Anger bubbled inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Acting rashly could jeopardize everything. He knew he couldn't confront the culprit immediately. If word got out too soon, the guilty party might cover their tracks or retaliate against those involved. Instead, Orson decided to document every detail meticulously, gathering irrefutable proof step by step. Each night, after everyone else had gone home, he stayed late, carefully photocopying documents and cross-referencing information until he had a complete picture of the fraud. But Orson also knew he couldn't handle this alone. He needed help from someone he could trust completely. That's when he thought of Marcus, the quiet worker who had always kept to himself but consistently impressed Orson with his intelligence and integrity. One evening, Orson pulled Marcus aside under the pretense of discussing a work-related problem. They sat together in a dimly lit corner of the warehouse, away from prying ears. Marcus, Orson began hesitantly, I need your help with something. Something serious. Marcus looked up, surprised. Sure, Henry. What is it? Orson hesitated, choosing his words carefully. There's corruption happening in this company. Big-time corruption. I've been gathering evidence, but I can't do it alone. Can I count on you? For a moment, Marcus said nothing. Then, slowly, a look of determination crossed his face. Of course. Whatever it takes. Together, they devised a plan. Marcus helped Orson analyze financial records, identify patterns, and pinpoint exactly where the stolen funds were going. They worked tirelessly, often staying late into the night, driven by a shared sense of purpose. Along the way, Orson discovered that Marcus was not only brilliant but deeply loyal, a rare combination in the world of business. As the investigation progressed, Orson couldn't shake the feeling that the truth would come at a great cost. But he pressed on, knowing that exposing the corruption was the only way to save the company and the people who depended on it. One evening, as they sat side by side reviewing the final pieces of evidence, Orson turned to Marcus and sighed. You know, he said quietly, when I started this undercover mission, I thought I was doing it for the company. But now I realize it's more personal than that. This isn't just about catching a thief. It's about proving that honesty and integrity still matter. Marcus nodded, his expression somber. And if we succeed, it'll be worth it. For all of us. Orson smiled faintly, feeling a renewed sense of hope. Despite the challenges ahead, he knew they were on the right path. Together, they prepared for the confrontation that would bring the truth to light and test the strength of their newfound bond. Months passed, and the day finally arrived. Orson had meticulously prepared for this moment, knowing it would be the most critical test of his resolve. He called an emergency meeting with senior leadership, including Victor, the man he suspected of siphoning off funds. The room was tense, filled with unspoken questions and apprehension as everyone took their seats. Orson stood at the head of the table, his heart pounding in his chest but his voice steady. He looked around the room, locking eyes with each member of the leadership team before turning his gaze directly to Victor. I'm Orson Gray, he declared firmly, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. And I've uncovered corruption within our ranks. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, murmurs, and shocked whispers filled the air. Victor's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly as he struggled to form a response. You're lying. Victor finally managed to stammer, clutching the edge of the table for support. This is some kind of trick. Orson shook his head, pulling out the stack of documents he'd carefully gathered over the past few months. Page by page, he laid them on the table, pointing out the damning evidence, bank statements, email trails, and signed agreements that painted a clear picture of Victor's betrayal. "This isn't a trick, Victor," Orson said evenly, though anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. "This is reality. You've stolen from this company, from your co-workers, from people who trusted you. And now it ends." Victor tried to deny the accusations, throwing up half-hearted defenses and blaming others, but the proof was irrefutable. Slowly, the rest of the leadership team began to realize the gravity of the situation. One by one, they turned their backs on Victor, leaving him isolated and defeated. After what felt like an eternity, Victor slumped in his chair, defeated. "Fine," he muttered bitterly. "But don't think this won't come back to bite you, Orson." Orson didn't respond. Instead, he focused on implementing strict measures to prevent future misconduct. He restructured the financial oversight process, ensuring transparency and accountability at every level. It wasn't just about punishing Victor, it was about rebuilding trust within the company. Despite the victory over Victor, Orson soon discovered that winning the battle didn't mean winning the war. Rumors began to spread among the staff, fueled by distrust and suspicion. Some whispered that Orson had orchestrated the entire situation from the start, using Henry Cole as a pawn to gather evidence against Victor. Others accused him of exploiting the scandal to tighten his grip on power. Tensions escalated until one day Leo, the gruff foreman who had once softened toward Orson, confronted him directly. They were standing near the construction site, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the clatter of tools. Leo's voice cut through the noise, sharp and accusing. "If you really cared about us," Leo growled, stepping closer, "you wouldn't have played games with our lives." Orson froze, the weight of Leo's words hitting him like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the realization that his actions, no matter how well-intentioned, had been misinterpreted. Then, slowly, he nodded, accepting the truth behind Leo's accusation. "You're right," Orson admitted quietly, surprising even himself with the admission. "I did use Henry Cole to uncover what was happening. And maybe I should have told you sooner. Maybe I shouldn't have kept so much hidden." Leo blinked, taken aback by Orson's candor. He hadn't expected an apology, certainly not such a sincere one. Still, his anger simmered beneath the surface. "So it was a game to you. All this time we thought you were trying to help, but you were just manipulating us." "No," Orson replied firmly, shaking his head. "It wasn't a game. Not entirely. I wanted to fix things, to make sure this company ran the way it should. But I admit, I made mistakes. I underestimated how much my actions would affect you all. That's on me." Leo stared at him, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, he sighed heavily, running a hand across his stubbled chin. "You know, boss, we used to look up to you. We trusted you. Now I don't know what to think anymore." Orson felt the sting of those words, sharper than any criticism he'd faced in business dealings. It wasn't about money or success. It was about losing the respect of the people who mattered most. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the decision he knew he had to make. "I understand," Orson said softly. "And that's why I'm stepping down." Leo's brow furrowed in confusion. "What?" "I'm resigning as CEO," Orson clarified, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "This company needs someone who can lead without suspicion, someone who can rebuild trust. Someone like Marcus." Leo's eyes widened. "Marcus? You mean?" "Yes," Orson continued, nodding toward the younger worker who had proven himself reliable and insightful throughout the ordeal. "He's been loyal, hardworking, and honest. More importantly, he cares about the team. He's the right person to take this company forward." Before Leo could respond, Orson turned to address the small group of workers who had gathered around, curious about the exchange. "Listen, everyone. I started this company because I believed in its potential. Over the years, I lost sight of something important, the people who make it great. If stepping aside means giving you a fresh start, then that's what I'll do." There was a long pause, the silence heavy with emotion. Finally, one of the workers spoke up, hesitantly at first. "Do you really think Marcus is ready for this?" Orson smiled faintly. "More ready than I ever was. Give him a chance, and you'll see." As Orson walked away from the construction site that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd done the right thing, even if it meant sacrificing everything he'd built. The road ahead was uncertain, but he carried with him a newfound sense of purpose. Leadership, he realized, wasn't about titles or power. It was about integrity, humility, and putting others first. Years later, Orson returned to the construction site, now thriving under Marcus's leadership. Watching the team work together, laughing and joking, brought tears to his eyes. The company had grown stronger, more united, and more prosperous than ever before. Marcus greeted Orson warmly, inviting him to stay and share stories of the old days. "Thanks for trusting me," Marcus said sincerely. "You gave me a chance when I didn't even know I needed one." Orson chuckled, patting Marcus on the shoulder. Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who step aside. As he walked away that evening, Orson glanced back at the bustling workspace one last time. Though he no longer held the title of CEO, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had learned that true success wasn't measured in wealth or status. It was measured in the lives touched, the trust restored, and the legacy left behind. And with that thought, Orson disappeared into the sunset, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself, and to leave the world a little better than you found it. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the 3 dots near the share button and send a super thanks.